Well, I just finished this little wall display. It's called How the West Was Lost. And what it basically does is shows the demise of the large, famous Western railroads. In a minute here I'll put the camera on a tripod and I'll explain this to you. But right now let's play some music and watch some trains run for a couple of minutes.
This blind glory, this train is blind glory, this train is blind glory, don't care nothing but the rest of the holy, this train is blind glory, this train. I'm walking down the track, I got keys, trying to read the letter from my heart. It's the train runs right on. And I hear that ocean whistle blow. I know her brother Finn, he was one of the clever. He said one never come on and ride the railway. 'Cause there ain't no prettier sight than a freight train rolling at night. You can hear the blow 100 miles. If you go, you can't come back. If you go, you can't come back. If you go, you can't come back. This train is blind glory, this train. This train is blind glory, this train. This train is blind glory, this train is with the right slowly. This train is blind glory, this train. This train is blind glory, this train. This train is bound glory, this train. This train is bound glory, this train is never runs slowly. This train is bound glory, this train. This train, this train, this train.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I ran the trains a little bit faster than normal there, just so I could keep in time with the music. And let's look at this wall display here. It's called How the West Was Lost. Essentially is what it is. It's these 10 Western railroads. In a 25-year span, became 2 railroads. That's between 1970 and 1996. Let's start here. We got the Great Northern, Northern Pacific, Milwaukee Road, Burlington, Chicago Northwestern, Denver and Rio Grande, Western Pacific, Union Pacific, Santa Fe, and Southern Pacific. Now, 3 of these are actually more Midwestern railroads. The Milwaukee Road, the Burlington, and the Chicago Northwestern were mostly Midwestern, but they came west quite a ways, Colorado and Wyoming. The Milwaukee Road actually had passenger service into Seattle. Alright, let's start here with the first very big merger, railroad merger. It was in March of 1970. The Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, and the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, plus a smaller railroad, the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle. Those 4 railroads merged together and formed the Burlington Northern. Okay. Now let's take the Milwaukee Road. The Milwaukee Road, they essentially shut down their western operations in the late 70s and early 80s and just became a Minnesota-Wisconsin railroad. And in January of 1986, they merged with the Soo Line Railroad. Soo Line was the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Upper Michigan Railroad. So they essentially went off the chart here. Okay, now let's go to the next one in line here, keeping by dates, was 1981, the Western Pacific was bought and merged with the Union Pacific. Okay, the next one to fall was in 1988. Actually, this was kind of unusual because usually the larger railroad will absorb or merge a smaller railroad. Well, in this case, the owner of the Denver and Rio Grande, because he had enough money, and he bought the Southern Pacific Railroad. However, he kept the Southern Pacific name, and that was in 1981. No, I'm sorry. That was in 1988. Okay, and the next one to fall was the Chicago Northwestern in June of 1995. That merged with the Union Pacific. Union Pacific took that over. So that left us with four railroads: Southern Pacific, the Union Pacific, the Santa Fe, which we haven't talked about yet, and the Burlington Northern. And there was kind of a fight, I don't know all the details, between who was going to merge. The Santa Fe wanted to merge with the Southern Pacific, I believe, but financially a deal couldn't be worked out. So they looked for the Burlington Northern. So that left nothing else except for the Union Pacific and the Southern Pacific to merge. So in September of 1996, Union Pacific took over and merged with the Southern Pacific. And the Southern Pacific came up here and merged with the Union Pacific. The Union Pacific retained its name and its colors. It's the only railroad that essentially kept its own name and own colors of all the Western railroads. Now, just 3 or 4 months later, in December of 1996, the Santa Fe Railroad merged with the Burlington Northern, and they became the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. Now essentially these two railroads cover the country from border to border. Burlington Northern Santa Fe goes back all the way to Seattle to the Pacific Northwest, and all the way down to Santa Fe, went through Arizona and into San Francisco, into Los Angeles and San Diego. The Southern Pacific covered most of the southern United States. They go down to southern Arizona, El Paso, Texas, through southern Texas. And Union Pacific, originally they went all the way up to Portland, Oregon, and I believe had a branch line up to Seattle. So essentially these two railroads now just intermingle. They go from Canadian border all the way to the Mexican border in 25 years. So that's my little display on how the West was lost.